Evening, morning, and afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. I hope you're having a wonderful week. Despite all the red in the market, we are here with the latest episode of the Inside Crypto Show, interviews and discussion with regular people just like yourselves. Today, we're joined by Sae'Von Springer, the founder of Native Assets. They are a blockchain firm specializing in educational training, detailed industry analysis, and corporate advising. Their mission? To empower you with the knowledge and insights to navigate and to flourish in the new digital asset era, the blockchain era. That's something we could all use, especially in these days and times. Friends getting in, friends getting out. Before we start, we have to do the usual disclaimer. Anything said by either Sae'Von or myself does not constitute financial advice. Our opinions are our own and are not to be connected with our respective organizations. Please do your own research. Because it's just Sae'Von today, he can spend some more time talking about his background before we dive into the crypto. Sae'Von, welcome to the show. Thank you for waking up very early your time. It is 6 p.m. Taiwanese time, 6 a.m. your time. So please, audience, take that into account. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so first off, Korean, I appreciate you tremendously for having me on the show. It's an honor. I've listened to your show. I'm very familiar with your organization and love the work that y'all do. And yeah, yes, it's a little early, but I'm a morning person either way, so it's all good. But yeah, a little bit about myself. I don't come from a traditional finance background. I don't come from a wealthy family. I think there's an increasing trend of people over the last several years, last several decades, who have taken it upon themselves, thankfully, as a testament to the resources that are available these days to be able to learn more about markets, learn more about investing. And there's all types of investors in different asset classes for different reasons. And historically, since I was young, 7, 8, 9 years old, I've been into technology. It was video games when I was younger. When I got into middle school, high school, it became cell phones, mobile tech. And so I used to tinker. I wasn't at the level of somebody from, let's say, Mr. Robot with hacking or anything, but I was familiar with the kernels and how to jailbreak and root mobile devices and, how to get access to files that maybe I shouldn't have had access to from some peer-to-peer sites and that sort of thing. So I was super heavy into tech. And for that reason, when I first heard about Bitcoin when I was in high school, I was around 2012, 2013. And then at that point, you hear about a new technological innovation almost daily. So I heard about it, like, oh, internet money. Oh, okay. And didn't think twice about it. I also wasn't investing anything. I had very little discretionary income. And by the time I was in college, I actually came back around. This was in the lead up to 2017's blow off top. And a friend of mine's uncle was mining Ethereum. So he mentioned it to her and she mentioned it to me, got on a call with him. And that's when I first put my first dollar into the crypto market. And prior to that, I was gold maximalist. I was, believe it or not, watching Peter Schiff daily, listening, reading James Rickard, and a lot of the kind of doomers who were like, the big crash is coming, the big crash. And my oh my, for years, I was waiting around for that big crash. And as luck would have it, as fortune would have it, looks like we might be watching that happen right now. And so, anyhow, got in purely off the speculation in 2017. I bought about a month before everything crashed. So I'm like, okay, realized losses, unrealized losses, gains till you sell. So I just held on. And over the next few years, I found myself increasingly spending more time trying to wrap my head around why this stuff was actually valuable and really discern and ascertain the actual use cases from the vaporware. And before I know it, I'm spending 2, 3 hours a day doing this, also learning how to trade, dabbling in some Forex and trying to figure that side of things out, playing with some leverage, and ultimately realizing that personally, I prefer long term investing over trading. This is my personality style. And I think by and large, it's safer, but regardless, it's good to have tools in your toolbox so that you know how to do these things. And in 2020, as I'm trying my best to prepare for the halving, expecting the cycle to do its thing, I was realizing as I was trying to tell people around me who would either ask me about it or it would come up in conversation that they still weren't really getting it. And and that's when it really hit me that I had spent so much time on YouTube, on forums, trying to learn about this stuff because I never had any direct mentors for this stuff. I had one supervisor when I worked a sales job. His name was Ben Jackson, and he did his best to teach us about IRAs and some different strategies, but nothing really hands on and sustained. So that's really where the idea of native assets came from. I literally was sitting down one night, stretching before bed, meditating, and heard this voice in my head say, "Teach them how to fish." And I was like, what is that supposed to mean? And after reflecting on it a little bit longer, realized that one of the best things I could do for my peers, my family, loved ones, and the industry as a whole would be to educate people in a way that was straightforward, thorough, polished, but also I did the best I could to not be biased, but also not hold my tongue about ideas or convictions I held strongly. And so part of that was you got to give the people the good with the bad. People think the crypto's anonymous. It's the opposite. People think that everything has value and it doesn't, or that nothing has value. And that's not true either. And why I always emphasize decentralization is one of the strongest attributes. And something like Celsius, we see, right, those things can come into play, and not all centralization is created equal. But yeah, so that's basically my background in a nutshell as it relates to native assets, crypto, and all of that.
That's very comprehensive. What happened to your Ethereum mining uncle? Is he still mining Ethereum? Are you guys still in touch? Are you mining Ethereum?
No, so I'm not mining Ethereum. And so it was my partner at the time. It was her uncle. And we separated some years ago. So
Okay.
I have not spoken to him since 2017. But last I heard, he had made enough money. And at some point, his wife was basically threatening him that if he didn't sell, XYZ would happen. So he sold. And yeah, I don't know if he jumped back in and turned that money and 10x'd it again, 20x'd it. I have no idea.
Okay. Like going back to what you said about teaching them how to fish. Not everybody has that altruistic personality. Are you altruistic by nature? Do you enjoy helping people? Or was it just this was the turning point in your life? You say, I want to give back?
That's a fascinating question because, funny enough, I was actually talking to my partner, my current partner right now, a couple of weeks ago, and told her about this realization I had that I'm an incredibly selfish person compared to a lot of other
What?
people. Yeah. And I mean that in the sense that there are some people that can live their entire lives putting others before themselves. I think about these as not like the people who are philanthropists for the sake of media or PR, but people who truly go out of their way and sometimes have to make tremendous sacrifices just so they can help other people. Think about certain folks who are in professions like social work, teachers even, who are dramatically underpaid, underappreciated, but are pivotal anchors in our society. People like that. There's a certain spirit that requires. And on the flip side, you have some people who they are really focused on having autonomy in their life and achieving certain things in their life that are based on things that they desire. I fall much more heavily in that camp. And so that's what I mean by selfish. So I use it in a bit of a loaded way, but it was this realization I was having as I was reflecting about some feelings and growing pains I was going through as a new father, and this feeling that I'd lost my autonomy and how that related to my realizing I was more selfish than I thought I was. But that being the case, at the same time, yes, I do like helping people. I like teaching people. And yeah, I've always been somebody who has had multiple interests, simultaneous interests. And so I can go really deep into learning something. And then I get really excited about telling somebody else who is interested in learning about what that thing is, particularly if I'm convinced that it would be of net value for that person. So I think that's where that came from. I was spending a lot of time by myself in isolation. And this is prior to any sort of, oh, you can't be around people or anything like that. I just taken some years and was a lot less social than I had been otherwise. And yeah, it was just a desire. Part of it was, oh, I think there might be a solid business opportunity here. But the other part of it was like, hey, if I believe in this sector, education, and I don't know if anybody can disagree with it other than regulation, but education is the biggest hurdle for people. And I'm like, all right, if I can contribute in that way, I might be able to have an outsized impact in the overall adoption and sustainability and future of this industry. So even that was maybe selfish.
And I totally agree. And that is the reason I got into, I shouldn't say got into crypto. I started working in crypto. I was like, okay, here's a chance, make a podcast, make YouTube videos, interact with people, say, hey, this is what I think, this is my opinion, this is what you can think, this you can meet people like Sae'Von and say, oh, he's another source of information, source of people to follow. People who are listening to the podcast, you guys won't get to see this fantastic video, which is the Native Assets YouTube channel. And Sae'Von, one thing I've noticed with your YouTube channel is what is the cadence of videos? What should people expect? Because you have this really awesome voice, which people listen to you right now. And you've got this really nice, cool mic setup. And you're going through what looks like a CoinDesk article on the video. And it's slowly scrolling down as you're explaining stuff and educating us. Like, what's going on with the YouTube channel?
Yeah. Full disclosure on that, my YouTube channel in 2020 was about electronic music production because I also make music, I compose, and I do all that sort of stuff. And so that slowed down once I started focusing on native assets. And then I created a separate native assets channel. And I was taking some of the content from the course that we have, Blockchain Foundations. And I hit this dilemma at some point last year where I was trying to reconcile selling quote unquote high ticket courses which is something people do. People pay thousands of dollars to learn about how to get six-pack abs or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was trying to reconcile that side of things versus the reality that the people who probably need this information the most probably have the least amount of discretionary income. And so if my goal is to actually help these people, I probably should give away as much information as humanly possible. And so that's where I started taking a lot of the content that's in the course and putting that on the YouTube, and then realized that for YouTube to work, you have to be timely. And so that's where I was like, okay, if I can just do a news recap, at least on a weekly cadence, then let me do that as I start to prepare new content, because I like to put some effort into the production just like you do. And that takes time. And I also now am working with the crypto companies, technically NFT. And as I said, I just had a son in January. So it's kind of reconcile my time. And I don't have a team. I do this all myself, literally every single part of it, from the videos, the editing, everything. So I missed last week because I was at Consensus. So I
Ooh,
didn't get the video done. But the cadence will definitely be at least one video a week, and we are going to do our damnedest to get that up to two. One fully produced video with scripts and all that, and then another news video.
nice, nice.
So
That's
definitely subscribe.
yes, you should. You should. For a large number of reasons, but you definitely should subscribe to Sae'Von Springer's channel, Native Assets. So you at Consensus, briefly, like what was it like, given the sort of crypto winter, the doom scrolling that happens in the last like 2 or 3 weeks? How did you find it?
I thought it was wonderful. I thought it was great. Yeah, I thought it was pretty well organized. The one gripe I have, and it's not like they didn't tell you that, but how they barred off access between the Pro Pass and the other ones.
Oh,
But to
okay.
be fair, that was only on Thursday. I just misunderstood. I thought Wednesday was that. That's more of a reading thing on my part. But I thought it was great. I thought there was great representation across the industry. You had very well-known firms and you had lesser-known firms. It was a lot of people. I didn't bump into a single rude person. Everybody was very kind. The energy was good. I don't think there was any air of pessimism or this feeling like, oh, crypto is dead. And it was something that I thought was very notable, is that for other brands, Apple, Microsoft, Google, what have you, we see their presence in real life. And most of crypto only exists for most people through a screen. And so to be in a physical location, to see these companies, these services, it was a different palpable feeling to it that was appreciated, and got to meet some cool people, got to meet some folks that up to this point I'd only interacted with via Zoom for work. And it was really awesome to get to sit down and meet with some of those people. So I would highly recommend it. Who knows what 2023 is going to be like, but 2022 was awesome.
Nice. And was it your first event, or you've been to quite a few crypto events before?
No, that was technically, I've been to one. Yeah, no, I won't even classify that. But yeah, so this was my first crypto event. So
Nice.
I contemplated going prior to getting this role. And then once I got it and I knew that they would be able to reimburse some of the travel, and I actually had a business reason to be there, I was like, yeah, definitely going to go. Definitely going to make it happen.
Nice. I'm so jealous. Still stuck out here. We leave Taiwan and you come back. It's still, as of this week, as at the end of this week, will be 3 days quarantine in a hotel when you come back, and 4 days
Uh,
stuck in your house. So it's cool, but no, that's great. You had a chance to go there. One of the things, you opened the door, you mentioned Celsius. We've got to dive into that first. I'm sure
Definitely.
loads of people are interested in that. What do you think's happening? For those people who don't know, Celsius has stopped withdrawals and swaps and transfers. And Celsius is very akin to a company, Nexo, if you haven't ever heard of Celsius. Like, what's going on today? Ethereum's like at 1,300, Bitcoin's at
Nah, it's at 12
25.
something, bro. This is bad, man. That's all perspective, actually, because, and I'm going to be very transparent, because I think transparency helps people grow. And I think that there's a lot of smoke and mirrors, not just in this industry, but in the world, in life, and people trying to maintain a perception about themselves. People who are hyper focused on things like 48 laws of power and all this other stuff, so they can try to manipulate the things around them. And I just say all that to say that what's happening right now is tremendous perspective as far as if you think it's good or bad. Coming into this cycle, I had a plan where I wanted to run up the bag as much as possible so that when this crash came, I could buy it up, like, with a hunger. You feel me?
I feel you.
I did not anticipate the market folding when it folded, and thus my portfolio lost a tremendous amount of value. Talking 70, 80% of its value. So for me, what's going on right now is painful, very painful. But there's some people who are sitting back laughing, gleeful at what is happening. making money on the short,
Yep.
hoping it goes even lower, buying it then, riding the pump, shorting it again. And I respect their skill. And so, what's going on with Celsius? I don't think it's any secret at this point. We're playing too risky. And it's funny because one of the things we do through Native Assets is we advise private clients. And one of my clients, early, like Q1 last year, he kept asking me about Celsius. Like, man, but it looks so good and they got boom, boom, boom. And I was trying to tell him, even at that time, yo, if I was going to touch any of it, I would touch Nexo. That's what I use. Reason being, they have certain partnerships that are too high profile for them to play around in a silly fashion. They have partnerships with Fidelity, they have partnerships with some other major institutions, and they provide live, real time, blockchain verifiable attestations to what's going on. And just the way the organization was run. They've always been highly transparent. They built a solid product. It was all these reasons of which anytime you're assessing something, give it good signs. Whereas on the other hand, literally in 2020, I tried to sign up for Celsius and there was no way to do it on their website. And then the app was clunky. And I was just like, okay, if they'll have all this money, but your app doesn't work, that's a huge red flag. And then looked into a little bit into Alex Mashinsky and some of his shenanigans. And so I just didn't trust him. And I told my client, I would not touch them with a 10-foot pole. All right. Now, take that all with a grain of salt. I don't know everything. I also had money in Anchor, and that worked out well till it didn't. And I lost some bread on that too. So basically, my take on this is that one, this is why I stress to people you need to understand what self custody actually means and the value that provides crypto. Now, that's not going to keep the prices from falling, but it does make it where you won't be in a position where you become a forced seller. And it also puts you in a position where nobody can tell you that you can't move your assets. And so I think it's important to be able to distinguish a Celsius from a Nexo, from a BlockFi, from an Aave, from a Compound. And that's part of what my job is with Native Assets is to talk about those nuances because too often people either don't understand the nuance or they abstract it so much because they want to sound like a finance bro or like they have some degree from Harvard when they talk about these concepts and use all this jargon that confuses the majority of people. So who are they really talking to? The people who already know what they're talking about. So who are they actually helping?
Exactly.
And that's my 2 cents in a nutshell. But I think next Celsius is going to fold. I think there's no way out of it unless they accept the offer from Next or somebody else tries to buy them. And I think that unfortunately, if you had money on Celsius, consider it gone.
It's really, really sad. I think you've probably seen some of the Twitter comments. It's illegal for you to hold my funds. Like they posted in the terms of service that Celsius has that provision that says, hey, by the way, we can stop everything if we want to, which is just terrible. And it just shows like how many people don't read the terms of service, how many people are unaware, how many sometimes experienced crypto people were like, okay, I'm using Celsius, even despite the reputation, despite the CEO, despite having knowledge that centralization is not that great. But I don't know.
I think a lot of it has to do with the affiliate links. I'm
Yes,
shocked sometimes when I listen to certain podcasts and what they claim they believe in versus what they promote. Like Anthony Pompliano. I listen to him a lot. But the fact he still has a BlockFi, promo in his ads. I don't know if he took it out of rotation, but just it's funny when people will scream that they're one way and then slide a little link in because it makes them some money.
exactly.
Yeah. And I'm not against people making money. I'm not saying that I've never behaved in a hypocritical fashion, but it's amazing to really see the extent of it in this crypto space. And yeah, people need to understand the terms of service, understand what an over collateralized loan means. There's a reason they make you put more collateral down because they will not, let you leave without paying them back. And yeah, we see that play out in different fashions based on how people are managing that risk.
Exactly. Like you mentioned this as well. You were looking for the bottom. This is like totally off script as well. Like I prepared just to listeners. This is absolutely not what I planned to talk about today. Sae'Von just inspired me with the whole Celsius stuff, but we're in it. Things are happening hour by hour. There's things happening with USD and Tron and shorts over there as well. We'll get into that later if we have a chance. But people like they had Davos that happened in Switzerland and a bunch of those big investment firms. Yeah, we expect a 9K Bitcoin or a 10K Bitcoin. And there's Bitcoin market dominance. We've talked about this on the Amun podcast before. The market generally follows Bitcoin in a sense. Where is there a bottom going to be happening this year? Some people I've heard like they're expecting 2 years of market turmoil, which would be the longest ever. In your experience and what you've learned and studied so far, like what are you feeling? What do you think is going to happen?
Oh man. So to be frank, when it's funny because this is my first top to bottom to top to approaching bottom cycle. And I think that people have to reassess what a cycle really is, because often it's viewed as bottom to top to bottom. That's like a cycle. But I feel you have to almost go through two to really understand what that is and how dramatic it can be. And also, obviously, there's some wild macro factors going on right now. I just say all that to say, obviously, I'm not perfect. I don't know everything. And you didn't say that. I didn't say that. And my disclaimer earlier about the state of my portfolio and not jumping out. But like I said, I like to be transparent. But I do have context and I have been in this game. And sometimes you take losses so that you really learn how to win. And all that being the case, I was doing some TA a few weeks ago and I was looking at the weekly candles and I'm like, yo, this joint is mad oversold. In bearish conditions, it's going to trend towards oversold as the majority of the time, and it might rebound to flat and then go back down. But underneath the roughly 27K, there's not much support until about 1920 from a TA perspective. And then psychologically, it's all a cascade effect. And then we talk about forced liquidations and people who are supposed to be sitting pretty in a solid position, people like a Celsius, people like a Nexo. And if they are caught flat footed, then that's when you get to that contagion and things spread. So to be frank, man, it could get catastrophic bad. It could. Obviously, I don't think anybody wants that to happen. But as I try to also be mindful, and this really what this cycle told me is that I have to spend as much, if not maybe more, focus on non-crypto markets to really be in sync. Because for a while, things behave in an uncorrelated fashion. And then based on what the Fed does, that's kind of going to dictate where everything goes. And there's some theory that until basically the housing market breaks or the energy market breaks, that everything keeps falling in free fall, basically, until those things break. Because obviously, the Fed, they either continue to push up these interest rates, which in their opinion is going to slow down or tame inflation. But if they do that, they literally can wipe out half, 75%, 80% of all the value in the market, if we're talking domestically, the US. So the question is, which one do they prefer, or which painful scenario which one is more painful? Inflation being high, or having the average consumer, not just investors, because the majority of Americans, majority of people worldwide are not investors, but the majority of people in the US do own a home. And if the value of their homes start to fall, and the people in real estate, like, man, housing prices never go down. Something like I saw Dave Ramsey say the other day. And I'm like, you a clown, bro. What you mean? Like, until it does. It's like people in crypto. Bitcoin will never go below this number until it does.
Exactly.
And then you have to reassess. Yeah, I think general wisdom, right? Executing on this is much a different story, is that until you see the downtrend break and there be very basic higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, it's going to keep going down, man.
Wow.
So I can't give a number on where the bottom is. Part of me is I know my bottom where I become a forced seller. I know that number. And we swift approach it. Yeah, I just think at this point, if you do have liquid capital and you do believe in this long term, definitely start dollar cost averaging. Definitely. I don't think that's a bad idea in the slightest, because we are literally below trend from Ethereum, last cycle's high at this point. And with Bitcoin, we're lower than we were at the start of 2021, at the end of 2020. And it's very likely, there's a high chance, depending on what happens at this FOMC meeting, if they say 75 basis points or they say a whole percent, man, yeah, you see what I'm saying? So it's part of me, and this was part of my thesis on why I didn't start selling sooner, was this expectation that at some point it would get bad enough, there'd be enough pressure on the Fed that they would be like, you know what? This is getting really bad. We're going to pause these hikes. Because then once that happens, boom, we going up, and it might be a 60, 70% rally for a while until things consolidate and then drop back down. And that was what I was waiting for, to start to really unwind my positions and get out. Things got so much worse before that. And it's funny. And I know we're off script.
No worries.
Type people listen to this show, all
Yeah.
education. It's fascinating to me how markets react. And it shows to me how delicate, and my degree is in psychology, but I never got into doing any work that required a psychology degree. But it's funny how delicate the mind is, because if I recall correctly, it was 8.3 was that high inflation CPI number. And CPI is like a super botched metric, but it was 8.3. And then the next reading was a little bit lower, and then 8.6. And all of a sudden, it's like that meme with the Joker. Everybody loses their mind. And then that causes what we've seen over the last 3 or 4 days. And so and right now it seems that the market wants to price in a 75 basis point hike. If it's 76, everybody will lose their mind.
Yep.
Just an example, but yeah, this is a tremendous learning opportunity, expensive tuition, depending on how you look at it, or literally and like a lineage changing wealth creation event because of the opportunities from shorting to buying up these assets that are very likely to be 10, 20, 30 times higher at some point in the next 20, 30 years. So it's anybody's guess. Anybody that really speaks like they authoritatively know what's going to happen next, I would caution on that.
Oh
It's
yeah.
easy to just say everything's going down because, duh, that's what's happening. Just like things are going up. Oh, it's going to go up further. Okay, thanks.
Like media personalities of character. I will mention that to our listeners and viewers. Is just people like Sae'Von. They will tell you, "I'm not perfect," and I've listened to people like absolutely guys with PhDs or multiple PhDs, and just down to regular people, and they will tell you nobody knows that the cycle theory, the super cycle theory. Who knows what's going to happen? And you opened the door and you mentioned inflation as well. Do you think there are other macroeconomic factors or bigger factors at play here, not just in crypto? Like you mentioned, you're not just focused in crypto so much, you're also looking at the markets as a whole and talked about correlation as well. And how people say, oh, yeah, coins become correlated or cryptos become correlated with the stock market. And then, oh, it's not correlated and no one can make up their mind anymore. What's your take on the macroeconomic factors, the correlation, or if there is one, or how do you feel about that?
Okay, so I'm going to say something that's wild. And if you have to edit this out, go for it. I won't take offense. Have you ever heard of something called the cloud pivot strategy?
No.
Okay. So I went through this period when I was at college where I started learning about things that I'd never explored too deeply at that point. Some of the stuff I won't even mention, but it just had to do with things that are an insane part of what happens in the world, particularly from an economic standpoint. A lot of money gets spent to fuel these things. Some of that has to do with a lot of illegal activity, bondage, human bondage, that sort of stuff. But there's this idea of kind of the Ray Dalio put out a really excellent video. You may have seen it a few months ago, but it was about the changing world order or something like that.
Yes.
And he basically explained and took the data and made a really family friendly depiction of really painful and volatile and stressful moments in history. But this idea of the cloud pivot strategy is this, and I encourage people to look it up, but it's this almost political, economic hitman type of tactic where the idea being that you take a society and you burden it with so much debt that it collapses in on itself. But you do this purposefully, almost like a Trojan horse, as a way to collapse that particular empire so that the one that you want can come in and take its place. And the reason I say that is because you're asking about macro factors. I believe that is what we are seeing take place. I just didn't think it would happen so soon. And so if you look at what America's role over the last 100 years, let's just round it up. Since about the tail end of one of the last world wars, it's about 100 years.
Yep.
They talk about these debt jubilees and cycles and things like that. And it's no secret to anybody who follows this stuff. China is not playing games, right? They're very dominant, whether you like them or not. They are dominant. A lot of people don't know this too. They own, last time I checked, this was years ago, they own over a quarter of the United States. Like literally the earth, the land in the US, they own an amazing percentage of it. They own some of the largest food producers like Tyson. They own it. When I say they, the country of China, Chinese investors, non-Americans. Yeah. Which is, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying so people understand this. And so the idea that the US is going to remain this dominant global leader, not forever. It doesn't mean they're going to fall to the bottom of the ladder, but that doesn't mean that they won't fall significantly in that chopping block, in that pecking order. And as I said, I didn't think it would happen this soon, but potentially what we are seeing is these things like printing that much money that they did in 2020, 2021. Some of the other structural issues, we're just seeing that really play itself out. And there's a lot of factors into that, some that are even more complicated than I can fully articulate. But you know how it is, man. A lot of this stuff is interconnected. These people who really have the money, these market makers, the real whales, they're not just looking at crypto. They're not just looking at equities. They're looking at timber. They're looking at oil. They're looking at exotic investments. They're looking at all these things. And none of these things exist or move in isolation. And I think that is potentially what we are seeing is the orchestrated move to get some of these bigger players out of the game. And we'll see how bad that gets for the U.S. in particular. And then that's going to be an indication of it being worse in some other places. But it's almost one is the intended target, let's just say the U.S., and then the casualties are some of these other countries that are already hyperinflating and are already seeing some crazy things go. Because that's something else I spoke about in the book, is that when currency collapse happens, because it's inevitable, a lot of times the perception is that, oh, all these currencies fall, but it's the opposite. The weakest ones fall in succession, and then as they fall and collapse, their value is absorbed into stronger ones. And so that's why we've seen the dollar rally over the last all of 2022, basically, is because other currencies are failing and their value is being absorbed. But what happens when the dollar collapses? Who absorbs it? It's something to think about.
I've heard this is not entirely surprising to me, and I've heard theories, not even theories, facts related stuff. And you mentioned, like, I posted something on Twitter the other day from rateinflation.com. Not even my site, was somebody else, some other YouTuber who was using the site, was like, oh, that's interesting. And you can see how everyone's inflation numbers are following each other. And it's just terrible. And you mentioned the book as well, and I wanted to talk about that. Where is your book available? Because I did see it mentioned on the Native Asset website, but I didn't even have a chance. Can we Amazon it, or like,
Yeah, Amazon.
Amazon? So
Yeah,
just,
yeah. It'd be ludicrous if it wasn't available on Amazon.
so yeah, on Amazon. Is there for audiobook people? Do you have an
Yeah.
Audible version?
Yeah. So the thing with Audible, at the time when I tried to upload it, there was like this discrepancy where it wasn't connecting my account with the book as me as the author to it, so I couldn't upload the file. But if you go to the Native Assets podcast, and so you can search it Spotify, Apple, all of that, or you can go to anchor.fm/native assets, and you just have to search for it. But if you scroll back, then you can find it. And it's just the episode's called Blockchain Blueprint. And it's like part 1, part 2, so on and so forth. And I've needed to upload it to YouTube, so I need to go ahead and do that and make a playlist. But definitely, you can find it on the podcast.
Nice. So it's available on the podcast. You can order the book
Mhm.
via Amazon, which is fantastic. This totally different direction for today's show, but anyway, like I want to talk about native assets as well before we end up today's show. Is native assets, are you just catering towards institutional investors, or can John Jones off the street walk up and say, I want to learn from Sae'Von?
So it was designed to help John Jones, as you say. That was the intention, the idea being, I am not an institutional trader. I'm not a whale, but I do know enough, much more than I'd say 90% of people. And then the other ones are the guys that I am learning from. So I'm taking a lot of that information out of that game, my own experience, my own insights, my own opinions, and then filtering that down to something that is useful and informative to somebody who knows nothing about this stuff, and getting them up to speed so that they know more than 90% of people as fast as humanly possible. And so that's really what the intention was with the Blockchain Foundations course that I put together. And then the book itself was a derivation of that because, as I said at the time, there was a high ticket on the course itself, and it's still not free, but it's $300. It's $297. So if you're not willing to invest that, I can't do anything for you. And then the book was a way to say, okay, how can I make the barrier to entry even lower than this? And so that's where the book came from. And I'd say the main difference is that the course, top to bottom, what's crypto, what's blockchain, what are the use cases, diving into smart contracts, oracles, all these little things. But then there's a whole investing section of it where I talk about how to create an investment thesis, the importance of it, how to trade, how to read candlesticks, on-chain metrics, all that sort of stuff. And it's basically a way to Trojan horse financial literacy through crypto as the vehicle, whereas the book takes out all of the trading and most of the investing. And we talk about dollar cost averaging, but the book is much more on, hey, what is crypto? What's a blockchain? What are the use cases, pros and cons of Bitcoin and Ethereum? And where are these things likely to be headed? And that's, like I said, only a portion of what's in Blockchain Foundations.
So the book is like a first step, and then you're like, okay, this is really interesting. I'm fascinated. I like what Sae'Von's saying. Then people can go and sign up for the blockchain course if they wanted to do it in that order, but doesn't have to be done in that order.
Yeah. So I would say that that's a great way to put it. The book is if you're curious, right? The course is if you're prepared to get started.
Okay. Like going on from coming, like I live in Asia, English
Mhm.
is not anybody's first language here except mine, because I'm originally from South Africa. But how accessible is the book? How accessible are the videos? Are you delving into really complicated language, or which is the best choice for maybe non-native English
Non-native
speakers?
speakers.
Yes.
The funny thing is, the book. I would say the book because it's shorter, it's written, right? So if I wanted to translate it, it might be easier to do that in some ways. But I did the best I could to write it in such a way where I don't treat the reader like they can't understand these things, but I don't make every word jargon. And if there is jargon, I take my time to explain it. But also, I made sure I didn't make the book definitions, because you see some books on finance and crypto, and 80% of the book is definition. So they get to inflate the length of the book and feel pat themselves on the back. Oh, I have this nice, thick academic type book, when most of it is literally just definitions. They don't really give you any context or teach you anything. But yeah, the funny thing is how I wrote the book. A lot of it, when I first started making the course, a lot of it was me gathering the examples I wanted to make, and then I would just start talking. And I realized very quickly that was going to be confusing to people. So I started making presentations for these segments. And so there was a lot of writing involved in those slides. And then that was able to help me serve as one of the bases to write the book. And then I took a lot of the sections that didn't have writing and I transcribed them. Also, if anybody's listening, I'm giving you a lot of game on how to write a book, or one way to write a book. So yeah, I try to keep it feels pretty conversational. There are some parts that are a little dense because my background, I have a writing background. Like I said, I'm a writer, I'm a poet as well. So I do get a little bit loquacious with some of the lines because I just thought they were poetic in how I wrote them, self-referential, but most of the book is pretty conversational.
Nice. Should we expect a second book? Because I can imagine this was like the foundation. Are there going
Yeah.
to be a second series of videos, another book to take people a step further?
Oh man, that is the $1 billion question. So
Do you have time now with everything that you're doing? That is, I guess, the other $1 billion question.
yeah, you know what they say, man. You have time for the things you make time for.
Yep.
So it definitely took a while to put the course and the book together. The book was a lot faster because it was based on the course, but the course took me several months to do. I'm not ruling it out. I'm definitely not ruling it out. I think there's a lot that I could do around NFTs because I mention them, but I could write a whole book on them. And I also think I could do something similar for trading, particularly given what I've experienced over the last 4 or 5 years. But I don't have a timeline for that. As far as videos, yes, I have a slate of videos. I have a how to survive the bear market video on the way. I have a how to get a job in crypto video. I'm trying to be in tune with what people
I
need
see
right
that
now.
bulletin board there in the corner, and I figure most people can say, "Oh man, Sae'Von's
Yeah,
already planning."
yeah. So I gotta execute. Sometimes I spend too much damn time planning. Yeah.
Nice. I think you've covered a lot of pretty much everything we want to talk about today. Is there anything you want to end off with? Any pearls of wisdom? Anything you want to plug for people? We've talked about the YouTube channel as well. Anything you want to end off today's show?
Thank you for that opportunity. I guess I would say it like this, right? There's certain things you hear, not just in crypto, but broadly speaking in investing. So it's kind of like two parts I want to address. There are certain things, advice, guidelines that are there for a reason. And as you get more experience, there can be a tendency to try to get more exotic or more fancy in what it is you're doing. From my own experience, please, and because I feel very strongly, had I had a mentor around me, somebody who was an active full-time investor, full-time trader, that I would have done things very differently because I would have had that peer who could see me and audit my own behavior because that's not what I had. I did not have that. I feel very strongly I would be in a much different situation right now. And I would be one of those gleeful people about to crash, sitting here with popcorn like, go Lord, so I could buy in. So I would say, if you're really serious about this, that is the importance and the value of finding somebody you can learn from. That's what I tried to do by creating Native Assets, is be a third party who can observe your own behaviors, give you some advice, and really let you benefit from my losses, right? Even this most recent one. And so if you're starting out and you really want to make progress, keep it simple. Find very solid things, but understand truly, people say don't invest more than you're willing to lose. You often can get to a point, if your portfolio gets large enough, where you can throw that out the window because this is your portfolio. Truly keep that in mind when investing. And leverage is a hell of a thing. I've always said that, but leverage is a hell of a thing. 99.9% of people should never touch it. Never touch it.
Totally agree.
Because then you don't become a forced seller. And then you don't have to realize losses that you otherwise would not have had to realize. So that could be a whole episode in and of itself. That could probably be a whole book in and of itself. The other thing, just to add on to that, is that if you happen to be someone who's invested and you have experienced some losses, it sucks, like really sucks. Can be really painful. Can cause a lot of knock-on effects in your life. But I would really try to encourage you to keep in mind that there are more things to life than money. And if you are dedicated and you are serious, you can make it all back, then some. If you learn from what went wrong and what you did wrong, and you take those lessons forward and that time is going to be your biggest friend. And keep focused on the things that are wonderful in your life. And don't make your life, the quality or the value of your life, a one-to-one relationship with the size of your portfolio. It's one of those concepts where, and it's something I strive for, I'm not there quite yet, but you don't want to be swayed by the highs. You don't want to be swayed by the lows. You want to be a steady constant no matter what's going on. And if you can achieve that Zen-like approach, you are very likely to be a much more fulfilled, joyful person, no matter what's going on in your life.
That just like that final portion, as we're doing the podcast today, I'm like, okay, what 1 minute clip I'm gonna clip and use that as a promo, and then just literally the end. This is it. I wish I could clip it all, but no. Amazing stuff, man. Absolutely stuff that needs to be said. People need to hear some of the mistakes you said you've made, I've made as well, and the sort of the same thing. I wish when I got into crypto, someone said, "Hey, Korean, don't do this. Narrow the size down of your portfolio. Don't try leverage." I never did leverage, but there were lots of things that I did that I'm like 3 years later, nope, that was a waste of time, waste of money. Shouldn't have done that. But yeah, fantastic, Sae'Von. Thank you so much for your time today. And I know, like, we have all the native assets social media. Is there anywhere, do you want people to follow you personally, or just prefer them to just channel that traffic to native assets?
Thank you. Another great question. Preferably channel that traffic to YouTube. So YouTube, and it's not the native assets YouTube. I know it's confusing. The Sae'Von Springer YouTube. Follow both if you feel like it. There are some smart marketing people who have much bigger brands than I currently have, and it's generally advised that when you're building something associated with you personally, so then you're also building your personal brand. If that's the thing you are focused on, and I am focused on crypto right now, so you won't see any like random Ableton tutorials from the YouTube channel, but I would say go there first. That's where free information is coming out. That's where you can see videos as well. And then secondary to that, I would say go to the website if you want to work with me, if you want to sign up for the course, if you want to get a consultation, because I also do direct consultations and coaching. And then you can also follow the podcast, which you should be able to access from the website and from the YouTube as well. And then follow me if you want on TikTok as well. That's the other place we're going to be going hard at. It's TikTok. And then
please send
ahead.
me the TikTok.
Okay, definitely
Yes.
will. Definitely will.
And sorry, I cut you if you said, and then.
No, and then if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, LinkedIn's the new Facebook. I prefer being on LinkedIn than Facebook or Instagram. I know I have to put content there for visibility's sake, but I would definitely say YouTube, TikTok, website.
Cool. Okay. I will make sure those, and Sae'Von, you're going to share some of those with me, because I think I don't have the TikTok. That is the only thing. I was pretty much everything else I do have. I did manage to find the Sae'Von Springer YouTube channel, but I thought it was native assets, which is why I didn't write it down for publishing the episode. So I'll make sure to put that down as well. All right. And yeah, thank you very much for your time, everyone. I'm sure you've enjoyed today's discussion, given everything that's happened in the last 24 to 36 hours, and wonderful sort of ending towards the show today. Sae'Von, I hope you enjoy the rest of your morning. Maybe take a nap if you're feeling tired, because it is early. But I mean, it is early. You're probably going to have to look after your son as well. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope we can get you on at some point in the future very soon.
No, I would love that. I would love that. So you were great, very prepared, excellent conversation, Korean. I appreciate you. I respect your work, man. And thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.
For sure. Definitely.